I'm only the welcoming committee, and my job is to introduce the real hero of this event, the president of the National Space Society, newly elected, Charlie Walker. I've already talked about Charlie Walker before, and you all know him as probably the first payload specialist to fly on a shuttle, and I think he was. But since flying on the shuttle, astronauts seem to have a way of getting involved in almost everything. They're today's heroes. I guess we'll have more to say about that later, Mr. Stine, but nevertheless, at this time, let me present Charles Walker, President of the National Space Society.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fletcher, and welcome all this evening. I do trust and certainly expect that you've had an interesting couple of days, 2.5 days so far, and we're going to have another half day tomorrow of business before we close out. I've seen and heard a lot of very good comments about the activities at the conference. Fully expect that the remaining events and activities are going to be just as interesting and intriguing to you. We have a few awards this evening. I intend to get into those expeditiously here. And if you'll bear with us, I apologize for the lateness of the hour. We did go a little long in the sessions in these rooms, ergo the lateness of the preparations for it. But primarily what you came here for, I believe, is not the awards and the meal tonight, but for the information that was conveyed, and that you had to give you an opportunity to interact with the speakers and presenters such as we had this afternoon. So, having gotten through that, let me begin by, before I start giving out the awards, telling you that one reason why I think all of you are here is because you want to see things happen. You want to see things happen and you want to make things happen in the venue of the rest of the universe. And humanity's efforts and activities to reach out for knowledge, reach out for enterprise, to reach out for adventure, to be there. And I wanted to bring to your attention tonight some information that I think some of you, maybe all of you, have in fact seen. Interestingly enough, the Los Angeles Times has chosen the last 3 days to make some statements. You've probably seen copies distributed or on the bulletin board, around the elevators, on the walls of this hotel. Something like a copy of this editorial that you won't be able to see holding in my hands. It's an opinion editorial published in the LA Times on the 25th of May here, titled "The Voyage That Might Anger, Not Inspire." And the lead-in for this opinion editorial by one Kevin Sweeney, who happens to have been the press secretary for former Senator Gary Hart. This is who they have to shrink to get to write opinion editorials opposing space. But Mars mission, it reeks of old men fighting old battles, a tired way to help us find that ephemeral national purpose. Yesterday in the LA Times, letters to the Times, letters to the editor. There are, how many? There are 4 letters, either printed in full or excerpted here, with names and with locations. And they are all very negative. And for instance, the last one here is short enough to read. President Bush has proposed spending hundreds of billions to reach Mars by 2019. George may be getting a little old by then, but I propose that a one-way ticket be reserved for him. I don't think that was meant in the positive vein that most of us would like to consider it for ourselves. I propose to you that if you believe in what I believe you believe in, and I believe you do, that there is some reason for action here. This action on the part of the LA Times, I think, is it should instigate a response. What do you think? I would propose to you that it is time, nay, it is well past time, that the pen and the paper and the word processor and the printer be put into use. I think it's even time to make an appointment and walk into the editorial offices of the LA Times. Look, it's really even time to go beyond the offices of the LA Times. We've got a lot of other electronic and print publishers in this country who don't have vision, who don't see a direction that's positive when someone points up. And they have to be shown that, in fact, the only real direction from which humanity can find itself and its way is which way? Up and out. Let's do some writing. Let's do some calling. Let's get to work. Okay. Enough said for the moment. Now, with that in mind, let me first of all present the National Space Society's Activist Awards. These are folks who are doing it. And if my sense is right, these are the first folks who are going to break for the door when they've got their award and make some telephone calls and write some letters. But by God, there ought to be a long line behind them. Let's begin. The National Space Society's Activist Awards are given, this is intuitive, to those who are performing, to those who the Society judges as representative, most representative at this point in time, not the only ones, of course, but who do epitomize in certain categories of effort, those who are truly succeeding, where we all need to succeed and perform better. For membership, many of our chapters play a tremendous role in spreading the word about the benefits of the space program and recruitment. The National Space Society is perhaps has the best measure of its success in the membership that it brings in. For the second year in a row, one chapter is responsible for the highest number of new NSS members. In the past year, the Western Spaceport chapter has brought in 217 new members. I'm pleased to present the Membership Recruitment Award to Jim Spellman. Captain Spellman, please. says he's not about ready to predict a three-peat. Well, I know he can do it, though. That is, unless there's somebody else willing to challenge him. That's right, huh? How about that? Let me move on. The Publicity Award for 1990. Publicity is, in fact, a lifeblood of this society and of its chapters. Our most important activity is to let the public know how vital the space program is. This year's Publicity Award goes to a chapter that has excelled in many areas. This chapter held a public space forum of distinguished speakers from the field. Of course, I myself was among them. The forum was filmed for the public broadcasting system to be televised in the future special on that network. This chapter has produced and published a comprehensive guide to jobs and educational opportunities in space, in the space field. The chapter's activities have also been covered by NBC TV, by CBS Radio, and 7 different newspapers. And as if this weren't enough, this chapter was also second in membership recruitment. Really, it is my extreme pleasure to make this Publicity Award to Audrey Robinson, who's president of the Princeton Planetary Society. And the award for special merit. Perhaps we should be known as the International Space Society, because we have truly become an international organization. We have active members in more than 40 countries. We have 14 international chapters, including our 2 latest chapters, one in Poland and one in Iran. If you didn't believe this organization was growing, I could say I told you so. I would say that. The goal of space development is bringing the people of Earth together. Our strongest and most active international group is the National Space Society of Australia, with 5 independent, strong chapters. Thanks to the NSSA, this August we'll see the first Space Development Conference down under. People like Kirby Eichen, the president of the National Space Society of Australia, are making sure that our dreams will be achieved by all peoples around this planet. Thank you, Kirby, for your tremendous hard work and for your extraordinary effort. No one deserves the Special Merit Award more than you and the NSSA. Come up and get it. Craig Ward will come up. I think there's a special presentation.
National Space Society is an international society. And to recognize that, one of the things the chapters have been doing is forming sister chapter relationships with international or non-American chapters. Last year at Chicago, Glenn Nagel, one of the chapter leaders for Sydney, came to the conference and sought out the people for Oasis and gave us these little Australian flag lapel pins and asking us to be a sister chapter with Sydney. Tonight, I'd like to give Kirby, as the leader of the Sydney chapter, a California flag lapel pin to complete the gift exchange and make it all official.
I don't know whether I should say anything here. I've had my little talk this afternoon, but what I said all throughout my stay at the conference is that we are very much an international organisation, that there are people around the world, and I think we all share a vision of just mankind going into space and creating a spacefaring civilization. I think we all share that, and I thank everybody very much for this award. Thank you.
The last activist award, it is the Activist of the Year award. Traditionally goes to that outstanding member of the National Space Society who has made the largest contribution to the creation of a spacefaring civilization. This year's award is really a Lifetime Achievement Award, although we expect many wonderful accomplishments from him far into the future. And if Alcor has her way, it's going to be far, far into the future. Instrumental in the founding of the L5 Society, this activist was a leader in uniting L5 and the National Space Institute, creating a stronger and more influential National Space Society that is you today. As president of SpaceCause and chairman of SpacePAC, he was a key to securing funds for space station freedom and is working vigorously on generating congressional support for the Space Exploration Initiative. Return to the moon to stay and on to Mars. I'm honored to present the Activist of the Year Award of the National Space Society to Vice President of the Society, Mark Hopkins. Mark? Now, because Mark is the activist that he is, I'm not going to let him get away with just walking off with the reward and the award tonight. He's got to come back and work for it here. Mark's going to come up and give the SpaceCause and SpacePAC award. Mark?
Oh, I hope this works. I'm taller than James Fletcher. It's really got two tasks here. The first one is the pleasant task of handing out a couple of awards. The second one concerns something you probably found in your chair. We'll get to that in a minute. We give in SpacePAC and SpaceCause one Outstanding Achievement Award every year. And this goes to an individual who has not been honored previously, who's not on the board or an officer, but chosen by the board of the organization in question as the individual, the volunteer, which has contributed most to that organization. First one of these will be for SpacePAC, goes to an individual who has done many years of service for SpacePAC. For several years, he wrote most of the alerts that were used internally to raise funds for the organization. He is currently an special assistant to the chairman of the organization. He was once an L5 vice president, and he was one of the founders of the Chicago's chapter, which is actually quite interesting because when I was charge of chapters for L5 a few years ago, I tried for a long time to get a chapter in Chicago. We went through 4 or 5 individuals. I called on the phone and say, why don't you do it? And call them 4 or 5 times and finally I'd give up on him. This individual and 2 of his friends actually pulled it off. And his name is Joe Redfield. Second Outstanding Achievement Award, this is for SpaceCause. Goes to a similar type of individual, but this time somebody who's contributed particularly to the SpaceCause organization. And the individual in question was the person who created the computer bulletin board system for SpaceCause, where we can send up alerts to most of the computer bulletin boards around the country. He's written a book on space law. He's currently a professor at the University of Tennessee. If that doesn't do it away, he's now chairman of the legislative committee, Glenn Reynolds. Now let's get to the second task, which is not as pleasant. We have a real problem in Congress. Basically a deal between Congressman Traxler and Senator Mikulski, who are the chairman of the respective appropriation subcommittees in the House and the Senate, which deal with NASA's funding. And they have basically decided to terminate the Lunar Mars program. The reason they're doing this is not because of budget problems this year, but basically because they do not like the budget implications of this program for future years. They're going to zero the funding. Their staff is making that perfectly clear to everybody in Washington. You call up some of our lobbyist friends in Washington to work with SpaceCause, and they say, well, I just had breakfast with the chief of staff, say Traxler's subcommittee, and he told me with a big grin he's going to zero Lunar Mars. In fact, they're probably going to pull out all the money which has to do with anything concerning manned space flight beyond low Earth orbit. Now, we need to do something about this. You have on your seat when you walked in, and also in your registration package, a letter from myself and James Fletcher, which tells you what you should do. Why is this program important? There's probably no other program in the NASA budget that's more important to our goals to establish a spacefaring civilization which will create communities beyond the Earth than this particular program. Furthermore, the President of the United States has gone way out on a limb in support of this program. If he loses it, it's going to be a major political embarrassment. And it's unlikely that he's going to do anything like that for the rest of this administration. Or for that matter, is anybody likely to do that in the next several administrations which come subsequent? I mean, there's a certain amount of political capital that the president has. If he wastes it, he's not going to be an effective president. And so presidents don't like wasting their political capital. So what I want you to do, what James Fletcher wants you to do, what I think you want to do in your hearts, is go out there and write those letters and make those phone calls, and maybe we can do something about this. I want to bury those guys, letters and phone calls, and make them understand that there really is public support out there for the Lunar Mars program.
This is a zero-G simulator. Really is a fact that there is no insurmountable obstacle or opportunity in space. I'm taller than either one of them is. Let's press on. I, at this point, want to introduce to you the president of the National Space Society's hosting organization at this conference, president of the California Space Development Council, Loyd Case.
CSDC was founded on principles of developing our relations in a consensus-driven manner. It's a coalition of chapters, and we basically don't do things unless everybody buys into it. And that includes things like awards. Fortunately, you can't get everybody to buy into it because you don't necessarily want the people who are getting the awards to know. But, and also, we don't give out awards in those years where it doesn't merit it. This year, however, it's been particularly difficult because we've had a lot of people and a lot of good work, and we had to kind of restrict it to 2 people. One person has traveled up and down the state. I've known him for a few years now. He showed up at the first CSDC conference back in 1985, and he was then a real eager Beaver college student. Some of you that know him still, he's still a real eager Beaver and a go-getter. He has done a lot of outstanding things, and what I'd like to do open this brown paper bag and read from the plaque. It says, "For demonstrating exceptional leadership in advancing grassroots space activism in California." And would Charles Miller come up and get his plaque? Every organization has somebody, when you're in a crisis situation, rises up to the occasion. This person really did that this year. I've received a lot of compliments on this conference. To be honest, I am not really responsible. The only program idea I ever had was a dance last night. Credit goes to Charles Miller and this other person who basically a few months ago really put this together after it looked like it was going to start coming unglued. And so I want to read from this plaque, and it says, "For pulling off the impossible in an improbably short time." 9th International Space Development Conference Chairperson Pat Montour.
Thanks very much, Loyd. All very well deserved, indeed. At this point, let me say that, remind you actually, that if you look at the back of your program for the conference, you will see that this conference has been dedicated to the memory of 2 space pioneers, to Dr. Professor Ehrman Obert, who died in 1989, and also to George A. Koopman, who we also lost in 1989. He was a member of the board of directors of this society, as well as a first-class individual, space entrepreneur, and a visionary. There has been a memorial fund established for George, and I want to introduce to you two trustees of the fund, Jim Bennette and Secretary of the Society, Margaret Jordan, say a couple of words about the fund.
We are a group of people who are united by common feelings and a common purpose. This makes us a community, in a lot of ways, one of the most important communities that we belong to. And it's appropriate that when we lose somebody who's been with the community for a long time, who gave it a lot, that we should stop and remember this person. And more importantly, especially in the case of someone like George, who didn't believe in just sitting around talking, he believed in going out and doing things, to do something appropriate. And what we're going to do now is discuss the memorial fund that's being set up and the purpose. But first I wanted to mention a few things about George. Margaret and I, both having worked with him for a long time, both in the society and with myself as my partner, and together one of the person who co-founded American Rocket. I worked with him, and he's serving as president of American Rocket for the first 3 years. It's important to remember what this person did for space and for the society. The fact that he was a supporter of the concept of the movement into space, the development and settlement of space from very early on. He supported the idea even before Dr. O'Neill first went out and publicized his concepts. He supported it at that time. He supported a lot of efforts in that direction. He was one of the very early backers, members, and directors of the L5 Society, and many, many times kept the society going by timely donations or other timely actions. He put his money, his personal effort, and in a lot of ways his heart and soul in keeping this going. He was very instrumental in the Moon Treaty fight, because George believed not only that it was the destiny of human beings to go into space, to develop and to settle it, but that we were going to go as free people. And being a person who truly detested oppression and bureaucracy, he wanted to make sure that we would go out with a minimum encumbrances of that sort. He was very instrumental in the Moon Treaty fight. He was very instrumental in keeping the society going after that, and he put his personal effort into it. There are so many different areas where George was active and important. I'm not even going to try to get into those. I think for tonight, just try to concentrate on what he did for the society. Margaret has worked with him on the board for a long time, and I'd like her to say a few words about it.
Yes, I think Jim has said quite a bit there. Certainly we all feel the loss, and it has only been a year, and I think I can still hear him, I can still feel him with us here. In fact, when I'm sitting at the board meeting, I could hear him exhorting us last year to get a quorum and get the work done. And that, of course, is what he would want us to do. He was one to really carry the vision of the society, I think. And many of us felt that he was a friend, and that for many of us, a hero as well, someone for us to look up to. And I just feel that the establishment of this memorial fund is very important in a way to continue his vision for the society and for humankind to live in space.
The fund itself is a fund which is an independent, autonomous activity under the National Space Society. Margaret and I are the current trustees. There also will soon be added a member of the Koopman family. This fund also has the backing and endorsement and quite a bit of contribution from the Koopman family. With the size of the fund that we expect to have, we are now intending to run an annual student contest for the best idea relating to the near-term human development and settlement of space, which will be called the George A. Koopman Memorial Prize. And this will be a project type conference, which we hope to award annually at the forthcoming space development conferences. And the prize will be an appropriate, sizable prize that will allow us to make a meaningful prize every year out of a permanent fund. The criteria for the judging the ideas in the prize: one, that it must contribute directly to the near-term human development and settlement of space. Two, that it must be concepts achievable without government funding. And third, that it be this kind of bold and audacious idea that has difficulty attracting support or approval from established sources. I think anyone who knew George, is as close as I can come to a definition of the kind of idea that George himself had to support. And we have already gotten a good deal of contribution from people both in and out of the society. At this time, I'd like to ask those of you who knew George and those of you who have heard of George and who approve of the purposes of this fund to send contributions marked directly for the George A. Koopman Memorial Fund, care of NSS headquarters. And since, as always, George had an emphasis on doing things rather than talking about things, I'm going to lead off this request by my own contribution for $200 and to announce contribution of Eric Fletcher for $100.
And you can add to that a check from Charlie Walker for $100 as well. Let me move on to Space Pioneer Awards of the Society. Space Pioneer Awards are themselves, as you have seen in the activist presentations, a grapefruit-sized rendering of the globe of the moon. The awards are given to activists, industry, and scientists in the categories that I'll come to. The first category that we have this evening is the space industry development program. Well, it's the award for business enterprise, and it goes to the Virginia Center for Innovative Technology for the state of Virginia and their high-tech center's efforts at promoting commercial space industry and technology development at the state level. A center based in suburban Washington, D.C. community, in the community, in fact, of Herndon, Virginia, conducts research with commercial market potential at Virginia universities and aids in creation and support of technological companies. Through several programs, CIT is bringing together business, government, and industry sources for the advancement of space enterprise. And I want to introduce the recipient of the award tonight, Mike Miller, who's General Manager of the Center for Innovative Technology. Mike joined the staff of CIT in 1988 as Director, Technology Commercialization, to create and implement a space program and direct CIT-funded entrepreneurship centers, businesses, and incubators. Mike has quite a history and experience in aerospace and government matters, having worked for Rockwell International's Washington corporate office. Before that, with as the Director of Business Development for the aerospace firm Orbital Sciences Corporation. Previously, he's worked with Texas Instruments, McDonnell Douglas Corporation, and Hughes Aircraft. This guy gets around. Michael also holds an engineering degrees in aeronautical and astronautical engineering and electrical engineering from the University of Illinois, and an MBA from the University of Chicago's Graduate School of Business. Michael, please come up and accept our Space Pioneer Award.
thank you, Charlie, and the National Space Society. I am indeed grateful and honored to be able to accept this award on behalf of a small group of dedicated individuals at the Virginia Center for Innovative Technology. Our mission at CIT, as we are commonly called, is to use the technological resources of our state to build Virginia's economic future. Our premise is that progress in future technology development requires the private sector and universities to work together to build technology infrastructure from which new industries can be grown. And states can play an important role in stimulating, brokering, and catalyzing interactions between universities and companies and government for this infrastructure development. In Virginia, it is recognized that space development is important for our future. It not only holds promise to provide new jobs, but can be a symbol to motivate children to learn science and math and inspire young adults to become scientists and engineers. 2 years ago, 38 business leaders in our state suggested that CIT should increase R&D, education, and business development activities to foster the growth of commercial space industry in Virginia. We took that charge seriously, but it was not easy. In fact, I recall going down very early to Richmond, which is the state capital. There, space development meant, were you in real estate? And outer space meant parks and golf courses. But a lot has changed in the last 2 years. Through university, technology, and industrial and development programs, we have created an awareness in Virginia and the nation that the states, especially those that already have the space infrastructure, can stimulate the creation of new space products and companies. While the nation debates space policy, the states are taking a leading role in developing multi-billion-dollar commercial space industries. Many states, as well as the people in this room, all of you, have a common understanding of why it is vitally important to develop the space frontier. But there is not a common understanding throughout this country, as we have heard tonight. To reach an understanding, we need to develop a consensus. And to do that, we must educate and innovate. It is everyone's responsibility to educate our leaders and citizens that space is important because it is economically critical to our nation's future competitiveness. That is important because as humans we wish to expand our knowledge and understanding of our world and the universe we live in. And it's important because it is in the tradition of the American culture to explore. But education is not enough. We must also innovate, to discover new ways to reach space inexpensively, to use the vantage point of space for economic gain. And we must innovate with new ways to speed the pace of space development. This award gives me and the other folks at CIT new ambition to continue to innovate. And I hope we can live up to that term, which is part of our name. Again, many thanks to the National Space Society for this award.
Let me move on to present the Space Pioneer Scientist Engineer Award. And the award in this category goes to Dr. Lyman Spitzer Jr. for his outstanding contributions to the space community through the conceptualization of a space-based telescope. It was Lyman's visionary 1946 study called Astronomical Advantages of an Extraterrestrial Observatory, which led to the Hubble Space Telescope. Dr. Spitzer is a senior research astronomer at Princeton University. Unfortunately, he's unable to be with us tonight, but accepting for him is Jim Westfall, who is professor of planetary sciences at Caltech and is also the principal investigator for the Wide Field Planetary Camera on the Space Telescope.
couldn't be here. Some of you know him fairly well, Jim Fletcher specifically, and Lyman is one of the nicest people any of us have ever met anywhere. He's a fantastic scientist, a man of vision, as you heard. He was also a very tenacious operator within the world of the bureaucracy of NASA, Congress, and so forth. We all owe him a great debt for his efforts to make SpaceCause come to be. And as you're, of course, all aware, we were launched recently. First picture was a few days ago. Things seem to be going very well with the spacecraft. It's a very complicated piece of hardware, as all of you would appreciate. It'll take us a little while to get it all tuned up and so forth. We need to go slowly so we don't do something we shouldn't have done. So we'll be producing more pictures, more data soon. In the next few months, we'll hopefully have some very spectacular things for you to see. I'm often asked, well, what about Space Telescope is going to be the most exciting thing? I think it's what Lyman realized originally, and that is those things that we're not clever enough, smart enough, or visionary enough to think about. That's what's going to be the most fun. The things we don't even think about yet. Thank you.
And the award, Space Pioneer Award for Business Corporate Contribution, is presented to Orbital Sciences Corporation, to OSC for its unique and pioneering achievements in the field of commercial space development. This Fairfax, Virginia Space Technology Company is the maker of Pegasus, the air-launched space booster, the first privately developed space launch vehicle to carry a payload into space. And accepting the award for OSC is Scott Webster, co-founder of OSC and Executive Vice President.
Everybody at OSC, we're just very pleased and proud to receive this good award. We're also very eager and look forward to some of our fellow commercial pioneers, the American Rockets, the Space Services, Space Industries, Geostar, and others, companies with whom we share a common vision and set of goals to, in years to come, receive the similar award. I think that we have a lot of kinship. All of us in this commercial space business know how hard it is sometimes, and harder than it looks even. That is, we've seen, as we saw with the LA Times today and other national press before, that sometimes they'll bushwhack you when you least expect it and you're least vulnerable or most vulnerable to such attack. For that reason, such awards are very encouraging, very supportive, and we thank you for it. I'd like to just also thank the L5 Society, which some 12 years ago did its pioneering work, or at least that's when I discovered it, in the area of space colonies. And that stuff got me to dreaming on space and changed the direction of my life. Appreciate that contribution to me. Just a word on OSC. We're probably best known for two commercially developed space launch systems. The first, transfer orbit stage, or TOS, which actually would have flown by now had not the Challenger had its accident. The second, the Pegasus air-launched space booster. On April 5th this year, with hands clenched and breath held, we made our first attempt to launch the Pegasus. And it worked. Yeah. That was almost 2 months ago, and there's still these white spots, nail spots on my palm. it was a thrill. Pegasus is, as Charlie said, the first commercially developed vehicle of any kind that's gone into orbit. In fact, only a few national governments have done such a thing in the past. It was developed in a brisk 2.5-year schedule. It's the first air-launched vehicle and the first vehicle that flies like an airplane flies at speeds in excess of Mach 8, with important implications for the development of the national airspace plan. We, with Pegasus, have established the lowest threshold cost to put anything in space, and at the same time lowered by a factor of 4 the cost per pound compared to the nearest available alternative. While the launch was a most welcome success, I think for the people in this room, equally important, equally interesting was what went on in the engine room that made that possible. First, I think first comes the investors. And the investors, I think, really proved, and OSC's experience in the market really, I think, without question proves that U.S. people are, at a grassroots level, are very willing and ready to invest in commercial space projects. In 7 rounds of financing, some of them more hairy than others, we've raised over $125 million. The company is now the first company as a pure play commercial space enterprise traded on the stock exchange. I want to comment on the development team, young group. We have now 600 people. The company's been around 8 years, and yet the average age in the company is under 31 years old. Very vigorous and productive group. That productivity, I think, is illustrated by the fact that we can sell an engineering hour at a price lower than you pay the Sears Automotive Center to pay that guy to put a new battery in your car. We can compete with anyone, anywhere in the world. Finally, I'd like to comment on our customer, our first customer for Pegasus, DARPA. Very courageously employed the nation's policy on purchase of government purchase of space systems, and they left us free of all of the invasive micromanagement and specification of our design. That made possible the quick reaction and low cost. We think that Pegasus, I certainly hope that Pegasus marks one of these paradigm shifts that Loyd Chase mentioned on Saturday. A paradigm shift that symbolizes that America can innovate and compete in space, and that maybe the commercial space sector can lead out in creating that spacefaring civilization. Our motto is, we won't wait. Thank you.
And the last of our Space Pioneer Awards, and the next to the last award for this evening, but by no means anywhere close to the least. The Legislative Award goes to Representative Ron Packard, Republican of California, for his outstanding contribution to space development through his leadership and development of pro-space legislation, specifically the Space Transportation Service Purchase Act. Representative Packard is a member of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Congressman Packard.
I have never received an award that I appreciate more because of the very proactive attitude that this organization has. I think it's the most proactive space organization in the country. And we're the only organization I know that goes out and creates your own recipients. I couldn't have done this without the help of many of you right here in this room. you came into my office and presented me with an idea that I liked, and then you helped me craft the legislation, and you've helped me immensely ever since as we've promoted it and brought it to the brink of success. And so you have created your own Legislator of the Year, and I can't believe that you'd give him an award after you've created it. We wouldn't be happy to receive the moon. I thank you very, very much.
And now let me end up the award segment here with what I think you'll find, I certainly believe, is not only the presentation of an award that we can all be very proud of, as it is the premier award of the National Space Society, but as you would expect of that, it's going to an individual who I believe is premier and certainly pioneering in this movement. The Robert A. Heinlein Memorial Award is established to honor an individual whose vision of humanity permanently living in space, his pioneering concept for more than 40 years ago of the geostationary communication satellites, and his advocacy of the global village is legendary. This man, Arthur C. Clarke, surprise, has written perhaps, and I haven't done a statistical assessment, but I believe has written perhaps more lucid words on the subject of human space exploration and development than any other human being. I think can best be characterized by a few words that I found that go like this. Arthur wrote, "Our civilization is not more than the sum of all the dreams that earlier ages have brought to fulfillment. And so it must always be, for if men cease to dream, if they turn their backs on the universe, the story of our race will end." With those words, I think Arthur shows us, gives us the spirit that is within all of us, characterizes that and places that in a realm that we human beings are now technically able and capable of achieving. What we are hoping that we can do is to span a couple of oceans and a couple of continents and bring Arthur the word that the award has been presented to. Whenever the operator gets us through the busy signal, if we can, I hope we can. We can get directly into to Arthur at home in Sri Lanka. I think, as you probably are all aware, Arthur's got a good many years already granted to him on this planet, and unfortunately, as I think we all at this point in time look forward to with some trepidation, some failing health may come about. And Arthur is not in the greatest of health, and so is reluctant to travel. And I gather that we're not able to. Arthur is probably scuba diving, which I dare say that we all probably would like to be doing. Me, certainly at this point.
What we could do is tell him his idea didn't quite work this time.
Yeah.
I think as we all know, the idea works quite well. It's just the execution that sometimes fails us. Well, we certainly will present to Arthur this 8-inch cannon. It's a functional cannon that represents, that is, the Robert Heinlein Memorial Award. Why a cannon? Robert Heinlein, one of the world's fondest known science fiction authors, posited a civilization grown from Earth, established on the moon in a novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and postulated that, in fact, as historically has been the case many times before, that a remotely deposited civilized institution will want freedom, will gain freedom, and a symbol of the lunar colony that in fact found freedom from the Earth was a cannon. So the society and some of our forward-looking members have really, I think, appropriately symbolized, and in very high quality form, this symbol of the freedom that in fact space is and will bring in greater quantity to the human race in this memorial. So to Arthur Clarke, the National Space Society's Robert A. Heinlein Memorial Award for 1990. The program back to our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you all.
Thank you, Charlie. You should be the MC, but not me. But nevertheless, having been the MC, I can't resist commenting on a couple of your awards. I think the Society is very perceptive in making 2 awards at least, one to Lyman Spitzer and the other one to Arthur Clarke. Lyman Spitzer is really the person who invented, twisted arms, and finally persuaded Jim Fletcher to go ahead with what we call the Large Space Telescope in honor of Lyman S. Spitzer. I mean, LST, the Lyman Spitzer Telescope. But somebody reminded me we don't do that unless people are dead, and Lyman simply wouldn't die. So it got named, after I left, by the way, the Hubble Space Telescope. But nevertheless, that was very perceptive of the Society to pick Lyman as the awardee for that particular event. In the case of Arthur Clarke, Arthur's very inventive and has contributed much to the literature, but I'll have to tell you a funny story about Arthur. We were more inventive and creative at NASA in the days when I was there first. And we sponsored a symposium on far-out technology down in Sea Island, Georgia. And we talked about artificial intelligence, and we talked about SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And Barney Oliver was there and made a great speech, and also handed out Hewlett-Packard calculators, first ones at that time. Arthur was there. Some of the members decided they wanted to talk about extrasensory perception, ESP. And Jim Fletcher, being the official, as we say, the bureaucracy, said, no way, we're not going to get caught in that trap. But if you want to, we have a relaxation period in the afternoon. You can go ahead and have on the lawn your own sessions on ESP. So they went ahead and did that. And they persuaded me to participate in one of their experiments, and they put these little electrodes on my head and measuring my alpha and beta waves and so forth, and asked me to think this way and see if I can make alpha waves, think that way, make beta waves. Well, while the young lady, beautiful, this is a sexist remark, beautiful young lady started to put the electrodes on my head, and I was lying down. She bent over. Arthur snapped the picture right there. And he has it on his wall down in Sri Lanka. Every time he wanted something out of NASA, he got it. I think they were way down in Satan. On a more serious note, the speaker of the evening is an extremely distinguished person, and he has so many things in his biography that it's just not possible to read them all. But let me just use some nouns and adjectives to describe some of the things that G. Harry Stine has done in his career. He has been involved in aerospace, industrial research, marketing, technological forecasting, future studies, space industrialization. Has written 48 books. He was science advisor to CBS during the Apollo program. I imagine he worked with Walter Cronkite in that period. He was awarded many medals, one by the United States Army, one by the French Aéronautique Internationale. He's written, among other books, The Third Industrial Revolution, The Corporate Survivors, The Space Enterprise, Confrontation in Space. He has worked with Werner von Braun, Huntsville. In fact, I guess on most of the early, we call them rockets in those days, now we call them launch vehicles. The V-2, the Redstone, the Viking, the Aerobee, the Talos, the ASP, and the Nike Cajun, which is still going, by the way. So is the Titan III, which is still going. And I guess the Titan IV. Did you overlap Titan IV? Wow. So he's done just about everything there is in the space business, but he's here today because he's author of a number of very cogent books on space. May I introduce at this time G. Harry Stine.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. That was a very charitable introduction from a former NASA administrator for an author who wrote a book called Shuttle Down. But fortunately, Doctor, it did not happen. It was not written on your watch. In thinking about what I was going to say to you tonight, it occurred to me that I was really being given quite a unique opportunity here. After about 3 days of the Space Development Conference and a lot of talking, I get the last word. This is a minor victory, by the way, among people who like to talk a lot. Now, I write better than I think. And I write better than I talk, I think. Well, at least I get paid for writing. But I was offered a free meal here tonight. And if I turned down a free meal, I'd have to resign from the Authors Guild. That's something that Robert Heinlein taught me. So since basically I'm the last speaker, save for your sessions tomorrow having to do with a lot of NSS activities, I suppose that I'm sort of a wrap-up man. So I'm going to deliver a post-note chat, which is something a little bit different from a keynote address. Now, some of us have been talking about space development for a long time. My mind was warped by one Robert Heinlein, and I learned a lot of things from that man. But Robert's left us now, and matter of fact, a lot of people are no longer with us, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. On Wednesday, the 11th of April, 1990, I had to take care of a very sad piece of business in Phoenix, where I live. I attended the memorial services for Gemini Apollo astronaut Ron Evans. No one ever called him Ronald. He was Ron. Ron was the second Apollo astronaut to die of natural causes here on the Earth. He had a wonderful sense of humor, by the way. During the past 10 years, as he was resident in the Phoenix area, he gave a lot of lectures on the subject, a delicate subject, of taking care of human physiological functions in weightlessness. We have a man here in the audience who has done that sort of thing. But Ron used to give a little talk, which I'm sure Charlie would agree to the title. The title of Ron's talk was, "There Ain't No Graceful Way." Ron went quickly of a heart attack early on the morning of April 6, 1990. He was 56 years old. The attendants at Ron's memorial services, they were impressive. The following astronauts showed up. Edwin Buzz Aldrin. He was the second man to walk on the moon. And with him was Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. Vance Brand, member of the first International Space Mission, Apollo-Soyuz, commander of the first operational space shuttle mission, STS-5. Gene Cernan, commander of Apollo-17, and the last Apollo astronaut to walk on the surface of the moon. Richard Gordon, command module pilot of Apollo-12. Ron was the command module pilot, of course, of Apollo-17. Dr. Robert Parker, astronaut, astronomer, first mission specialist on Space Lab that flew on STS-9. Harrison Jack Schmitt, astronaut, former senator from New Mexico, and the only geologist to set foot on the moon thus far. He was a lunar module pilot, of course, of Apollo-17, the mission in which Ron flew as the command module pilot. The list goes on. Donald Deke Slayton, one of the original Mercury 7, one of the 3 American astronauts of the Apollo-Soyuz mission. General Tom Stafford, pilot of Gemini 6, commander of Gemini 9, commander of Apollo 10, American commander of Apollo-Soyuz. You know these names? Sure you do. These men were some of the public heroes of the space age. They came to Phoenix to honor a fallen space age hero. I don't believe there's been such a gathering of eagles since the tragic Apollo 1 services that took place in Arlington National Cemetery. Or were these men the first real heroes of the space age? While I was driving home from the services, I recall I'd been chatting with Bob McCall there, and I got to thinking about that. I'd remarked to Bob that this was probably the first of many such services yet to come. Then I recalled that there'd been those before the astronauts that had been space heroes to me. I believe we're starting to see the departure of the second generation of space heroes. The first generation is nearly gone. At least the ones whose names were widely known: Dr. Wernher von Braun, Dr. Hermann Oberg, Robert Heinlein, Billy Lai. Hey, these were the people whose written works and their charismatic leadership led the first generation of people toward space careers. Me, for example. Yes, a few of that generation of space heroes are still here, but their names aren't very well known. Now, the second generation of space heroes include the people who actually built the vehicles that carried the people, that did what the first generation said could be done. They actually built the vehicles that flew in space, and the occupants walked on the moon. The American astronauts, the Soviet cosmonauts, they risked their lives, literally risked their lives. They rode on top of long-range artillery ships because that was the only way to get into space. There are also people who put their careers on the line who were behind these men. People who had made the choice of doing what was politically correct and doing what they knew in their guts was right. Now the second generation has started to leave us. Where have all the heroes gone? Where are the new space heroes? I think there's one in the audience tonight, Charlie. I think George Koopman was another one. But where are the others? Where are the Von Brauns of today's space age? Well, they're here. Charlie's here. George has left us. But there are a lot more of them probably buried in the stifling and rather overwhelming bureaucracy that is built on the foundations of the conquest of space. Or they're struggling to make a success of trying to do it differently this time around. I mentioned a couple of people that I think are heroes of today's space age, but can you think of some other recent heroes in the aerospace era? Who flew the last shuttle mission? Some of you may know. Who were the pilots that recently flew the retiring SR-71 Blackbirds and went across this station in a few minutes more than an hour? Do you recall their names? Matter of fact, who was the flight crew? TWA Flight 735 on 17 April 1990. They were what? Just one of thousands of flight crews all over the world doing something that was impossible 50 years ago. Thinking about it, other than Charlie and George, I thought of two other recent heroes in the aerospace, Gina Yeager and Dick Rutan. Why do I think they're heroes? They climbed into a marginally stable and very nearly overweight small airplane, and they flew it clear around the world on a single tank of fuel after they had damaged it on takeoff. They risked their very lives. They put everything on the line, and they endured the kind of hardships that most of us never have to face. But why were Yeager and Rutan heroes? I think I have an answer. Heroes are people who put it all on the line. They face and they evaluate great risks. They tell the universe that they're human beings, that they don't meekly knuckle under, that they try and they continue to try until they can no longer try. Yeager and Rutan prevailed, not because of luck, but because of drive, motivation, the willingness to go to the mat, backed by their ability to think their way through it. Right at the moment, our American culture, and to some extent our American space effort, is doing its very best to keep people from becoming heroes. Now, society always has a very disturbing tendency to force people to live safe and utterly boring lives. I really can't understand why some educators will bewail the lack of interest, motivation, and learning among their students. They themselves created the situation. But not everyone wants to live safe and utterly boring lives. But we're human beings, and particularly Americans. We're a perverse species. I mean, we're mean, we're nasty, we're hard to get along with, we're covetous, we're argumentative, we're vicious, we're selfish. We're also idealistic and kind, and loving and generous, and willing to put our very lives on the line for intangible benefits. Thanks to those apparently opposing human characteristics, we fiction writers can make a living. And thanks to these traits, the human race makes progress. Sure, I believe in progress. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here tonight. We Americans are also somewhat unique among the human species. Historian Dan Borstein points out that we like to try new things more than any other people on Earth. We created what he calls a republic of technology. We're an experimental society. Now, such a society has to be a culture of heroes. Bucking the tide, doing something new, trying the experiment. These things call for a person to put a lot of things on the line. Risk is involved, but not all risk is the same. The mere fact that we're willing to take any sort of risk at all is a whole hell of a lot better than not wanting to take any risk whatsoever. We also like a challenge. We don't do diddly if we don't have a challenge. Right now we're looking for one, all of us. I talked to Marty Caden on the phone the other day. You know, he was the author of Maroon, creator of the $6 Million Man, the Bionic Woman. He pointed out to me that World War II came to an end in 1989, not 1945. I hope he's right. I really do. If he is, does this mean then that the early space activities that generated these real heroes were part of a wartime situation? Does it mean that we can't expect to carry this over into the new peace of the millennium without major changes? Well, some of these changes were debated here during this conference. The problems of making the transition from the old space program to the new peacetime ones, they're not technical, folks. Marty Caden said it, remember? Hey, we can do it. We have the technology, right? The problems are not financial. We have the money. And we can make money with space if we begin to approach it differently than we have in the past. The problems are political. This involves more than what goes on at Playland on the Potomac. Politics involve each one of us. Robert Heinlein pointed that out, and he said, politics is one of the greatest inventions of the human race. Politics keeps most of us from killing most of the rest of us most of the time. Now, the major problem with doing things in space right now is this. Who's going to do it? The government or private enterprise? The government's been doing it up to now because I think it was a wartime imperative. Whether or not this peace dividend is real, or whether our elected representatives will really tackle the deficit, the fact is that I don't think that we can expect the government to fund major space activities in the future. Now, talk is cheap, and we've been getting a lot of that out of Washington. But I don't think either the motivation or the funding is really there. And that was evident by some of the editorials in the Los Angeles Times. Now, for many years, I stood before gatherings, and some of you have been in these gatherings, and I've told you, hey, if you want to do great things, wonderful things in space, figure out a way to make a buck doing it. 9 out of 10 of these attempts are going to fail. The risk is high. Hey, but that's never been a real showstopper. Or we'd still be sitting on the east coast of this continent. Or, even worse, our ancestors would have never left their homelands to come to the New World. Risk requires heroes, or the heroic mentality, and certainly the heroic willingness. But unless you, and you, and you, and you start thinking about this and begin to realize that if we're going to have a future, we're going to have heroes. And if we don't have heroes, we won't have a future. And that would be too bad. But I have hopes, lots of high hopes. We're coming up on the end of a century and the end of a millennium. This is a time to do great things. This is a time to try the impossible. There's one caveat. that I would lay in front of you, and I think Robert Heinlein would have laid it in front of you too. Don't demand that others support your dream. You've got to convince them. Look, loyal, dedicated followers and acolytes are far more valuable than a conscript army of reluctant supporters. Now, the old first sergeant always used to tell his soldiers, don't go out and become heroes. Well, I'm telling you here tonight that you've got to go out and become heroes if you want to do what you really want to do. Where have all the heroes gone? I think I know. When will the new heroes become known? Well, I can't predict who, what, or where, or when, but you're out there. I know you're out there. You continue to pop up. For example, there's a man named M. Stuart Millar. He was an old fighter jock who drove P-47 Thunderbolts around the skies of Europe in 1945. He made a fortune out here in Southern California in the electronics business. Back in 1987, he took an enormous risk and he laid everything he had on the line. He sold his very profitable electronic businesses and he bought a company called Piper Aircraft Corporation. He paid cash for it. He owns it outright. Stuart Millar loves airplanes. Hey, so do I. Matter of fact, I flew over here to Piper Airplane. Now, Millar saw that Cessna and Beech, they were going down the tubes, along with Piper. Soon there'd be no more new single-engine airplanes, and people like me would be flying around in antiques. So one of the reasons why all of those companies, like Beech, Piper, were on the ropes, they were actually leaving the industry, was because of the horrendous cost of tort liability claims, suits, and awards. Now, Beech Aircraft simply stated that $86,000 of the price of a new airplane had to be set aside to defend liability suits. Now, Stuart Millar knew this, knew the risk, and he evaluated the risk, and it was high, but he put it on the line, he bought Piper, and he stood up and he told the world if they wanted to lay a heavy product liability suit on Piper Aircraft, they'd end up with an airplane company and not a multi-million-dollar settlement. You want an airplane company, boys? Come get it. He's still running Piper Aircraft. 1989, Piper made and shipped 800 new single-engine airplanes. He put the entire line back in production. But if you want a new Piper airplane, the demand is so high, if I pranged my Cherokee, God forbid, I'd have to wait until 1992 to get a new one. He's backed up that far. Now, in my mind, Stuart Millar in aviation is as much of a hero as Lindbergh or Chuck Yeager or even Buzz Aldrin. And here's why. In a recent interview, Stu Millar said as follows, and I quote, "One of the great changes in the last 50 years is the growth of an idea that says death is unnatural. It must be somebody's fault." Now, it wasn't always that way. People accepted and realized that life is a gamble. Maybe you'll live a long time, maybe you won't. We more easily accepted the idea in the past that to live and to experience life was to accept danger. So it isn't a question of whether or not you will die. The question is, and I'm still quoting, the question is whether you will die having done nothing or done something. End quote. Do something. Don't talk about it. Do it. Maybe you'll be a hero only to yourself. But the chances are you're going to be a hero to a lot more people than that. Because heroes are desperately wanted. Because people lead such dreary and boring lives. But whether or not you're a hero and change history, you'll know yourself that you saw risk, you evaluated risk, you took risk, and you'll know that you're a human being. I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Inspiring talk. I can remember to this day when I was 10 years old, waiting for 4 hours for Lindy to come by in his limousine and confetti and so forth. Lindy was my hero. Makes you think we have anti-heroes, Donald Trump and Zsa Zsa Gabor and so forth. Before we close this meeting, I think we ought to hear just a word or two from the chairman of this conference, who has already been introduced to you as pulling off the impossible in the shortest period of time. Miss Pat Montour, the hotel calls her Patty. I don't know if she likes that or not.
As you can see, I fit right at the microphone. As everybody knows, something like this isn't done by one person. Just no way it can happen. And the biggest driver of this conference has been programming. And I would like to give a big round of applause for Charles Miller, who has put all the programming together. He has just been I would also like to introduce you to and have them stand some of my more important volunteers. If I forget anybody, please forgive me. Karen Savage, would you stand? Ray Miller. Jackie Jepson. Ron Jones. Carol Amato. Catherine Brown. Marianne Billingsley. Diane Rhodes. Diane Fredericks. Craig Ward. Dennis Whipple. Harvey Lasuda. And there was also a large contingency of Chicago, I believe they were all from Chicago, I may have been wrong, from the Chicago chapter, folks that got in here on Thursday that I'd like to thank for helping put together reg packets. Chicago has been very supportive. As you know, they were last year's conference. And I really thank them, Jeff Liss especially, for all his 1,000 pounds of data. But for all their advice and their help, you've been wonderful folks. I'd also like to make special thanks to the NSS staff for all their help. I'd like to see you guys stand too, please. The NSS staff's at the table here. Doug Fulmer, Kate McMahons, Julie Katz. Is there anybody I'm forgetting that's here tonight? Lori Barber, of course. We've on the phone once. And even though they've left, I'm sure you all have noticed the uniformed young ladies and gentlemen who have been making sure you have your badges, as income badges. They're not here, but I'd like to give recognition to the Civil Air Patrol, the Corona Squadron 29, or Corona Composite Squadron 29. And there's two people who have kind of had a, shall we say, a background contribution to this conference. Their house has become the local drop station for Federal Express and UPS. I'd like to really thank my roommates Bob Hillhouse and Teresa Tyler for putting up with all this conference mess. Would you guys stand, please? And I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. You can hurt me later. I'd like to make some announcements. First of all, a company called Infomedics has been recording pretty much all of the conference where they could. They're I'm assuming, doing a wonderful job. I haven't heard any of them yet. Feel free to stop by their booth, I guess you call it, just outside the conference area tomorrow and pick up some of the tapes of some of the better sessions and everything. Also, we have posters from the conference that kind of focus in on the mock trial that was orchestrated by Wayne White, by the way, who did a wonderful job. And they're on sale. They're on sale in registration. Please feel free to stop by and pick one of those up. Also, we have there some raffle tickets. Loyd Case, our president, has donated a very wonderful calculator from Hewlett-Packard, and on the back of those raffle tickets is also a coupon over at Godfather's Pizza. Good stuff. Also, I'm supposed to announce that there is a party in the hospitality suite, number 329. Please stop by and join us in celebrating the conference. I think that's about it. Did I forget anything? And now I have the pleasure of introducing the person I get to pass the baton to. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Carol Luckhart Redfield, chairman of next year's conference.
Just in case anyone hasn't made it to the co-sponsors room, I'm going to give you a hint as to where next year's conference is.
Deep within my heart, there's a memory beneath the stars aglow, where in dreams I live. Memory, rose, my rose of, where is it, Carol?
San Antonio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next year's conference will be in San Antonio. The theme is Space a Call for Action. We'll be doing and setting up people to do. We will start with a reception on Wednesday evening and have 4.5 days of programming and other events. We invite you to join us for the 10th Annual International Space Development Conference in San Antonio, May 22nd to the 27th, 1991. And please register tomorrow. You can come up to the co-sponsors room and register at a reduced rate in the morning. Thanks.
Well, before I close this really fun banquet, let me just say I'm really impressed. The National Space Society has come a long ways, and it can do anything. I really think the Space Exploration Initiative will go ahead, and mostly through your efforts. And just before we close, I'd like to tell a story about what you did about 1976. We had started the shuttle program, and as you know, the shuttle is the first real spaceship. All the others were expendable, but this was a reusable spaceship. And we were going to have a rollout of the first shuttle about summer of 1976. And we said before the rollout we ought to give it a name. And NASA, in its wisdom, picked a name which we called Columbia. We decided we're going to, since they are spaceships, we'll name them after famous ships of yore. And Columbia was, of course, a well-known ship as Challenger and Discovery and so forth. So we named it Columbia. And we sent this over to President Jerry Ford, and it came back, no way, it's called the Enterprise. All of you had written in, I guess you were all Trekkies in those days. Persuaded Jerry Ford to be a Trekkie also, and he named the first one that flew off the back of the 747 the Enterprise. And it's the only real Enterprise there is. If you look at the other Enterprise, it's just a little model in the Air and Space Museum. There is no real Enterprise. Nevertheless, thank you all for coming, and thank you for inviting me. Good night.